Welcome to the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce Influencer Series. Our Influencer Series is a spin-off of our very well-received Login and Learn web series. My name is Richard Perez. I'm President and CEO of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. The Influencer Series is an authentic, thought-provoking dialogue with individuals leading businesses, institutions, and agencies. The new wrinkle is how their views look through the COVID-19 pandemic lens. We wanted to elevate different perspectives on how the community is working, but of course now we're all being impacted by the current situation. And so a lot of this will be sharing a variety of ways leaders are adjusting to this diverse condition that we're all facing. As we move towards recovery, we realize that people in our community are facing colossal challenges that are testing every aspect of their lives and of their livelihoods. Collaborating and being in sync with our actions has never been more important. In service of that collaboration, our goal here is to have conversations that are authentic, informative, and purposeful. I firmly believe that together, San Antonio will flourish and emerge from this pandemic more resilient than ever. Today's guest is Alamo College's Chancellor, Dr. Mike Flores. Dr. Flores will talk to us a little bit about the pandemic, the impact of the pandemic on the colleges and how they plan to reopen and the challenges and opportunities ahead as a community. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Chancellor of the Alamo Colleges District, Mike Flores. They are the largest provider of higher education and workforce training in South Texas, serving nearly 100,000 people annually. The Alamo College District and its family of colleges, which include Northeast Lakeview College, Northwest Vista College, Palo Alto College, St. Philip's College, and San Antonio College, award more than 10,000 degrees and certificates annually. It's the first community college system ever to achieve the prestigious Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, which is a presidential award and the nation's highest honor for performance excellence. The district's eligible colleges have all consistently ranked in the top 10% of community colleges nationwide. Alamo College's moonshot, under the leadership of Dr. Flores, is to partner to end poverty through education. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here today, Richard.
Excited to have you. Looking forward to our dialogue. So we'll jump right in. And before we get into the meat of it, I think it's important for folks to understand your personal story. You want to tell us a little bit about where you grew up, how'd you get into education, and how did you get to where you're at?
Sure. Born in South Texas, born in Del Rio. And fortunate to have come to San Antonio. Graduated Holmes High School and Northside ISD, and then for my undergrad went to UTSA. After that, wanted something a little different and went to Illinois for my master's degree. And then, of course, missed Texas, and then returned and earned my PhD at UT Austin. Which I think is a point of pride, right? Just wanting to come back to the state. Most importantly, wanting to come back to San Antonio. Both my parents worked in the public sector. My mother, a social worker, and then my father, actually an educator, starting as a high school teacher in Del Rio, and then working actually for close to 30 years within Alamo Colleges at San Antonio College. And then I've been with the organization, worked my way up for the last 20 years. I tell folks I'm not a first generation college student, I'm second generation, but I tell our students that I am, for many of them, what their children will be, right? Hope for a better life. And after they've earned a credential, chances are that their children will pursue that journey as well. So I've been with Alamo Colleges, been blessed to be with the organization for 20 years, and I'm actually the first internal hire. So the first time that the Board of Trustees has hired a CEO who's grown up within the system.
Excellent. Well, I can certainly relate to the draw of South Texas, having stepped away myself for about 13 years with my family and taking other jobs and going to school. But home is where the heart is, right? And this is where my heart has always been. So just like you. So thank you. That's great.
Yes, sir.
So Mike, let's talk a little bit about students and educational programs. In addition to that, though, the Alamo Colleges are a significant employer in this community.
Yes.
As the head of an institution with thousands of employees, literally, multiple colleges, centers, departments, what is it like for you to react and adapt to this public health crisis?
Yeah, I think one of the things is we often, when we're in the community, talk about our 65,000 credit students and then the other 25,000 or 35,000 students in workforce, right? So serving close to 100,000 folks. The part that I think is important, and thank you for that question, is we also have 5,000 employees. So we're all
5,000. Wow.
5,000 employees. So we're a big distributed organization throughout Bexar County, one of the largest employers, 5,000 employees, 3,500 are full-time, and then the other 2,500 are part-time. We have a general revenue budget of close to 382 million. When you include our bond and our maintenance tax notes, which is another 500 million, right,
Wow.
in bond dollars for construction and capital expense, then you're talking close to $1 billion investment that is being made within our community, which is really, really significant. The other part is we're fairly distributed throughout Bexar County, and in fact, in 7 surrounding counties. So we have our 5 colleges, as you mentioned, and then we have 8 regional centers, several of those in Bexar County, and then 1 in Comal and 1 in Kerr County, right? So, and then we have about 50 off-campus sites, whether that's a high school or a community center and places of business. And I think as you look at that, that means that things are not fairly contained within the organization, right?
Sure.
So fairly distributed, and we want to ensure as part of that we do right by the community. We impact 1 out of every 4 folks within our community, either as one of those 100,000 students, as one of the 5,000 employees, or being part of that household.
Well, and I think, Mike, my goal there was to be able to just get folks to understand the scale, not
Yes.
the education piece aside, but you are a big business by any standard. Yes. And that is a complex deal to manage all that. And so tell me about, how do you manage it? What's a typical day look like just on the management piece of that?
Yeah, I think one of the important things is that yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah,
it's natural. It happens all the time now.
Yes, it's all part. Do you want to say hi, Mia? So this is part of our work-life balance here,
yes,
right?
It is.
So I share this space with my wife, who's a small business owner herself, Martha, and
yes,
then also our 2 daughters, right? Our first grader Mia, who just turned 7, and then our 7th, soon to be 8th grader. 2 more days of school for Mata.
All
so,
right.
So I think one of the things is,
so I guess we could call that a cameo.
That was a cameo experience, yes. And so one of the things that we look at is just like in the household, right? We're all in it together. I think it's the same thing with the organization within Alamo colleges, is that we're also all in it together. So I'm fortunate that we have a really high performing team. We have a set of principals, what we call the strategic leadership team, all 5 of the college presidents. And then we have 5 what we call vice chancellors that also have a specific portfolio. So 1 based on academics, 1 on the student experience, right, with academic advising and registration. Then we have 1 focused on IT. And then we have our CFO focused on administration. And then also looking at all of those areas, economic and workforce development. Sure. So that big team, and then we also have each leadership team at the respective colleges, and then each vice chancellor within their portfolio has subject matter experts that are significant. And so, yeah, so that each of those folks then working with at each of the 5 colleges, and then also within our district support operations. The other part is that we're fortunate with that team that we have alignment from our board of trustees. So we have 9 board members that are elected by single member district within Bexar County. I'm the CEO within the organization. I report directly to them. And then the 5,000 employees, including the principals, report to me. So it's a fairly broad distributed organization, as we discussed earlier. And I depend upon them to ensure that we effectuate and serve our students and community.
Excellent, excellent. Well, very much like a public company, right? You know,
Yes,
you've
sir.
got a board of directors, you report to them, and your job is to make sure that the business is running well. So, and I think it's running very well.
Thank you.
In fact, you know, I had the great opportunity to say a few words at the Alamo College's celebration for receiving the prestigious Malcolm Baldrige Award last year.
Yes.
Of course, the award is a recognition of innovation, improvement, and visionary leadership. Tell me, how do you plan to keep operating at that high level moving forward?
So I think one of the things that we're fortunate is that Alamo Colleges has used the Malcolm Baldrige framework, right, which started during the Reagan administration in the early 80s and really based upon increased global competition. So the thought is, how do we use this framework to ensure that American private and public sector organizations are high performing? So we've utilized that for close to a decade. We were honored, and thank you for your words and for championing Alamo Colleges, Richard, and the Chamber's role within that. But we were honored to receive that recognition. That framework is based upon the categories that you mentioned, right? Leadership, strategic planning, what we call workforce development. How do we utilize talent internally? How do we connect in a partnership-oriented culture? I think many of those are imbued within the system. We do a yearly check of that whole process, which is a self-assessment process, and then we benchmark to other organizations that are best in class, not only amongst community colleges and not only in higher ed, but also public and private sector organizations to see what they're doing, how we can learn from them, and how we can implement those practices. One of the other things that we do is we have kind of a proof of concept model that has 3 stages, and we've utilized that to a large degree within the organization. So it's kind of DIA in a positive sense, right? So it's a discovery. So we look at what are best in class things that maybe a college is doing or a department or unit is doing. How do we develop that proof of concept? How do we then, from the discovery phase, incubate it? How do we kind of start that up and leverage that change? How do we develop a more robust proof of concept? And then how do we accelerate it? So, you know, discovery, incubation, acceleration. And we've used that for very different things within Alamo Colleges. There could be something good that's going on at San Antonio College, like what we call the Student Advocacy Center, which provides wraparound services for their students. They developed that. Palo Alto College was a partner within that, and then we took that to scale most recently this year for wraparound services at all 5 colleges. I think the other part is then this COVID experience itself, which you mentioned. So how do we as an organization utilize practices that we've developed now? So one of those is actually rounding. So all of our HR partners do rounding on a daily basis. So we have a team of about 10 folks that check in with different teams at different colleges or centers, series of questions and prompts. How are they doing? We then, the leadership team, gets a rounding report every morning. We then have twice a week, we have huddles, daily check-ins in this way. And then we have agenda items in which we go through both COVID, different frames related to IT, student support, academics, and the rounding report is part of that. So we've been able then during this period to utilize the same framework of discovery, incubation, and acceleration with regard to rounding. We have our frontline folks, whether it's a faculty member talking about their class experience via what we use is Zoom. Okay. It could be an academic advisor that's interacting with a student via Zoom or via text or email and can let us know of things that are occurring and with regard to our systems and how we can address those. So that feedback loop is pretty instantaneous and pretty quick. The rounding was something we were looking at. We actually implemented it as part of our COVID period during this last 8 weeks. And it's something that I plan to continue as we go back into reentry and recovery phases.
Excellent. Well, it seems to make a ton of sense given that you're so distributed, right? You would understand what's happening on the ground at any one time and be able to be nimble and react that way. So that's great. It's a fantastic takeaway that anybody could use for their own personal businesses. So let's talk a little bit about reopening. I know that you all have been working, as you've said, remotely. The students are learning remotely. Have you given a thought to reopening, what that might look like, a time frame? How do you get PPE out? Those just logistical challenges.
First, I just want to thank the Chamber. I want to thank you and your leadership role in the community during this period, during COVID. I think we're also fortunate that Judge Wolf and Mayor Nuremberg have also taken a leadership role going all the way back to February, right? And then just being aligned and ensuring that we can be successful. One of the things that we're going to do is what we did in late February, early March. We have a task team of subject matter experts, both from our district, but most importantly from the colleges that are looking at how they planned at that time, and really it accelerated in mid-March during our spring break, but they planned at that time to figure out how we could shift all of our operations to what we call remote teaching and learning and remote work. We've engaged them again and to see how we can plan for reentry. So we're ending this week with, as you mentioned, over 10,000 graduates. So we're honoring them this week with virtual graduation celebrations. We hope sometime in the fall, perhaps in December, to be able to have a face-to-face interaction. So we're going to, of course, be mindful and keep posted on that. That task team of close to 100 folks is now planning for that reentry that will occur in the fall. Related to that, what we're looking at is probably a sense of hybrid, what we call hybrid classes. So we will have some students that will go on to each one of the 5 colleges for coursework starting as early as late August. Most of those courses actually will probably be the coursework in which we need experiential learning. So it's going to be in our workforce. Right. So we're reliant on team members to be able to plan. What does that look like then for reentry in the classroom? What does it look like to ensure that we can preserve, right, social distance, that we can ensure the safety and security, which is paramount for us, as with any organization, for both our customers, which are our students, also for our colleagues, my colleagues, faculty and staff, and then for any community members that are going to come on to the college campuses or any of our facilities. So that's what they're planning to do. It's going to be what we call a hybrid. So some folks will be on campus, face-to-face, preserving social distancing principles, and some folks will continue in this way, remotely, being able to connect. We've heard from faculty and staff there are some upsides to utilizing remote, perhaps not during a pandemic, but there is a factor of convenience. And so some faculty have commented that students who perhaps are reluctant to contribute to classroom discussions, find their voice with this medium. We found amongst our academic advisors, which are a main point of contact for our students to keep them on their journey to graduation, that students actually are more likely to show up for their advising appointments because of convenience of Zoom, and I can see that many of our students work, many of them even during this period. So can have somebody who's working perhaps at HEB, right, who takes a break and has arranged to have their academic advising appointment during that break. So then all they have to do is pick this up and connect with their academic advisor versus being stressed about just transportation and logistics of getting to the campus. So there are those things, and as we plan for reentry, that we want to ensure that we honor, right? That the technology and the medium actually does have some advantages to it. And then the other part are practices that we want to continue as we re-enter, like the HR rounding reports that I mentioned earlier in our conversation.
Well, interestingly enough, so you talked about the convenience factor. We have seen, as a result of going to this medium for our meetings, probably anywhere from a 12 to 20% increase in people being able to now join us for our meetings, because they don't have to drive across the city to get to wherever the meeting was. So indeed, there are some benefits. Of course, I think the other side is the closeness and the, we're humans, right? And so we need to touch and feel. And so I'll touch on, or maybe say a word about the wraparound services. And I think given this lack of touch, feel, closeness, I think the need for wraparound services is increasing, because I'm certainly seeing it kind of business community wide on the need for, mental health services and just connecting with people to be able to talk about how they're feeling. So I really applaud you for the wraparound services. That I think is going to take an even increased importance as we move forward.
Yes. So I think if we look at what are the ways that we can continue to connect with students, one of the things is our network of advocacy centers that are at all 5 of the colleges. There's actually a student helpline that is funded through United Way that started this past year. That's based at one of our colleges, San Antonio College, but all students can call into that helpline. They can receive referrals to agencies. They can be connected to one of our personal counselors. They can also fill out an application for federal or state benefits, or look at how to access food if they're food insecure, or what are the things they need to connect for emergency grant aid. So we've offered for the past couple of years emergency grant aid to students if they need assistance, short-term assistance to help pay a bill, to help bridge them to the next pay period, or the resources that are so helpful for them. So I think that obviously continues. Personal counseling via this medium may be a little different. It may have an upside to it, but we're cognizant that we also value face-to-face and physical contact with folks, right? We're social beings. And so how do we continue to preserve that within this environment? And so those are the things that my colleagues are looking at for reentry in August. And as we continue to move forward with this COVID lens, as you mentioned earlier. But we want to ensure that students are supported. One of the things from the CARES Act is we've actually been awarded for all 5 of the colleges $11.2 million in what's called emergency grant aid. So that is going directly to students who are in need. And then that just started. In fact, we'll have distributed about $6 million by tomorrow.
Wow.
And then we'll have the remainder of that we'll use in the summer, and then the remainder which will be used for students as early as August and continue all the way to December of this year. That's one of the things I think also, I think there's an upside to being a big organization, is that we do have economies of scale, right? We have bandwidth to be able to deliver things quickly through the organization. So that's really also an upside to be able to do that, and to bring task teams together from different parts of the organization who kind of lend their expertise to the issue at hand.
Well, and I say, wow, for 2 respects. Number one, to get that you're able to be that nimble and get that much money out that quickly. But wow, also, of course, it's a direct point to the fact that we have that need in this community.
Yes.
And thank goodness that we're getting those kinds of resources to be able to address some of it. So I'm glad y'all are getting it out. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about now you as an institution of higher education, and of course having that annual budget that you talked about. How do you see COVID affecting you all's budget going forward, and how are you all managing through it?
So I think, one of the things that we're fortunate, we are a high performing organization. You mentioned that we're the only community college district, right, to have earned the Malcolm Baldrige Award within the United States in its history. The other part is we enjoy a AAA bond rating. So we're one of only 33 community colleges within the nation that have that distinction. So we're a well-run organization. We also have a reserve and fund balance. 15% of our annual budget has to be reserved for instances in which we may need some short-term relief. We do have a fund balance, which is what I call our district savings account, right? Our Alamo College's savings account that we can draw on from time to time. Our revenue mix, our revenue stream is a little different from the 2 public universities, A&M San Antonio and UTSA in San Antonio. So we actually draw 40% of our revenue mix comes from Bexar County taxpayers, right?
Right.
Which is part of from the taxable asset value. Then the other 40% comes from student tuition and fees. 20% comes from the state. So all of those, we're constantly monitoring all three of those streams, right? So we're looking at indications from Bexar County as when the property tax appraisal notices are going to go out. And for that stream in particular, we're thinking that obviously both protests and delinquencies may go up slightly, but that it should be level. So we're planning on that to be pretty much flat, right? We're looking at student tuition and fees. We're thinking that that may be flat to perhaps a slight increase because of more students coming in. Community colleges are the best sector to be in within higher education during an economic downturn. Our cost structure is lower than our counterparts in public and private higher education, as well as our tuition is the lowest. And so if we are, 1/4 to 1/5 of the tuition of other counterparts within the community or within the state, and if our cost structure is lower, then that's a good position to be in.
Sure.
And the other part is that we provide all the way from short-term credentials and certification all the way to a 2-year associate degree. So we also have a broader market that we can serve within that. With the three revenue mixes and streams, Richard, we're thinking that 2 of those will be flat, property taxes and tuition fees, or perhaps increase slightly. But we are expecting that from the state, that 20%, the remaining 20% of our revenue mix, that's going to go down. So we're doing, we all engage in strategic planning. I think now we're looking at scenario planning, right?
Yes.
So we're looking at different scenarios. So we're planning on either a 10% cut from the state or a 15% cut from the state. But that's only a fifth of our expected revenue. So that would impact us overall perhaps by 2.5% of our overall budget, or 5% of our overall budget. The other part is we have our lessons learned from the recession that occurred, over a decade ago, and so we have lessons learned from that, and that's also imbued within the system of what are things that we can do. We've done and instituted a hiring chill, so that means that amongst our 3,500 full-time positions, if we have any vacancies, the only positions that we are hiring are frontline folks. That's faculty, right? Our instructional faculty, because that's critical to the student experience. That's our academic advisors who interact with students on a regular basis. That's our enrollment coaches who onboards prospective students. And that's our instructional designers and IT folks. So IT, because we need them to keep this whole system working within remote teaching, learning, or work. And then also instructional designers, because they're helping to construct this student experience. When we look at anything, we want to ensure the team that we normalize the student experience in business operations. So organizational kind of efficacy and normalizing operations from this year to next year, which will be a little lean, to the following year in the biennium, right? 21-22, which we expect will be even leaner. And then hopefully we're headed for a recovery fairly quickly, right? That's what we all want. But we see a 1 to 3 year horizon in which we just need to be able to ensure that we are efficient and effective in supporting our students, and for us, supporting our faculty and staff to ensure we have a robust student experience.
Excellent. Well, the things you've just mentioned are just like any other business, right?
Yes, sir.
Either hiring a chill, as you've called it, or hiring freeze, making sure that you're putting your resources where they're necessary, looking at the scenario planning going forward and long-term planning. So, very, very key to keeping the doors open and keeping robust in the things that you do. So that's great. Tell me about the opportunities and challenges you see, given that everything now is online. Do you think that the whole online and the new way of doing business is going to affect persistence and graduation rates?
So, one of the things, as I mentioned, our board of trustees, we have a board meeting which will be virtual on Tuesday, and we're going to show them what we call our KPIs, our key performance indicators. Students at Alamo colleges, at any one of the Alamo colleges, are the most successful that they've ever been. So we see increased graduation rates, transfer rates, increased placement rates within the workforce. We're beginning now also to monitor increased earnings. So what does that credential get you? What's the value add as a result of the credential? So all of those things, because we're the largest provider of workforce training and higher education, we believe we're in the talent development business, right? We work with talent and folks. So we want to ensure that we can continue to have the same success rates during this period as pre-COVID, and we want to maintain that going forward. We have 150 academic advisors within all 5 of the Alamo colleges. They go through the same 60 hours of training so that our students can have a consistent experience. So we can also monitor what that looks like and be mindful of their key performance indicators. Those 150 advisors, along with some flex staff, contacted every one of our 65,000 students during the last 8 weeks to ensure that they're connected, they feel supported, and they can be successful. And so those are the things that we're mindful of. We want to continue. We realize that this could be a little bit of a hiccup, but we want them to be as successful as they've ever been. If there is something in which they need additional support, we want to be there to provide that to them.
Excellent, excellent. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about Alamo Promise. A lot of momentum behind it, a lot of excitement. What's the status of Alamo Promise? How are things happening, and are they slowing down? And what are your thoughts going forward with the success of Alamo Promise?
I think that it is, we're fortunate. So if we look back at what Alamo Promise presents, a couple of things. One is that we expected we'd have 3,000 students, and we, out of a universe of 9,000 eligible students, we've had close to 5,000 students who have completed all of the steps. And so all 3 steps. And so that we're fortunate about. We want to onboard as many of them as possible. We provide at Alamo colleges, which I mentioned earlier, is a high quality, low cost undergraduate experience, which I think we're really fortunate about. We're working to ensure that phase 1 is successful, which is 25 high schools. And then we're looking to see how we can bring on phase 2 high schools, which are an additional 20, which is either this year or next year.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that it's been a pleasure serving on the steering committee, the Alamo Promise Steering Committee. We jumped on board as soon as we heard of the initiative. We are excited, and we think this is a fantastic vehicle to get young people where we need them to be successful going forward. So congratulations to you, and thank you for that continued focus. You and your board have been laser beam focused on it, so it is to be commended. So thank you for that. All right, so this is our final question, Mike. Every part of our community has been impacted by COVID-19. Upskilling, retraining our workforce, the digital divide, mental and physical health, those are some of the main issues that we all need to be addressed, and not just you all, but the entire economy. From your perspective, what does San Antonio need to get right as we develop various plans and initiatives for our recovery?
I think that we're fortunate that San Antonio has a partnership-oriented culture, and the other part is that we're resilient, right? So folks in our community are resilient. What we need to do is we really need to come out of this COVID period stronger than we've ever been. So I think that there are specific challenges, the opportunities for improvement, as we call it in Baldrige language. One is, how can we upskill the talent that we have within the community? So I think workforce development is part of that. Alamo Colleges is the largest workforce development provider. If we were to look at CARES funds or partnerships, local, statewide, or national, that we would have within our community, I would urge us as just a starting assumption and a goal is that we would be able to ensure that each worker, each person within the community could be upskilled and have a post-high school credential as a result. That could be a badge, that could be a specific certification that they need within the workplace. It could be within their current field or allow them to pivot to a new industry sector. I think that the chamber, Richard, both the organization and your board, I think that if we look at the city and the county, if we look at the sectors that we've identified, many of those are COVID resistant. So IT is successful in any environment. We know that healthcare is, we know that bioscience, if we look at aviation, but specifically aerospace, that is as well, and even financial services, right? So those sectors pre-COVID are resilient, but even more so post-COVID. I think that's the important thing to realize. Alamo Colleges wants to play a role within that. We want to ensure that as an open access institution, that a person can come for short-term training of 3 weeks, 12 weeks. It could be a year or up to 2 years for that associate's degree or preparing them to transfer to the university. So we should be stronger coming out of this in San Antonio after COVID, and that involves training folks, and that involves the credential.
That's fantastic. And I think you just coined a phrase, COVID resistant. I hadn't heard that one, and I like it, though. I wrote it down, so I'm going to use it, and I'll attribute it to you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank
Mike,
you.
thank you so much for joining us. This has been enlightening. It's been fun. And I can say, without any doubt, your board chose well. You've got a vision. You're executing on that vision, and it's impacting lives in the right way here in this community. Your heart is a heart of a servant leader, and so thank you. It's been fantastic.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Richard, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate the role that you and your team and the chamber and your board have played within the community, because it's critical, and especially now more than ever.
Thank you, Mike. So before we close, I have a few reminders to everybody. Please know that the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce is committed to being a valuable resource to our businesses and the greater community during these unprecedented times. Visit our Chamber's Rapid Response website, sachamberrapidresponse.org. There's a ton of information on there. How to apply for aid, resources to help you with employees dealing with issues, places to, if you have deals that you want to give to the business community to help, it's all there. So please get on that. And I'll close by reminding everybody about the 2020 census. We're in the midst of filling out our census. We want to make sure that those resources that are available as a community to San Antonio and the region, we get them. And the only way we can get them is if you fill out your census. So please encourage your employees or yourself, if you've not done so, fill it out. It's extremely important, and it will make a world of difference, particularly in this very difficult time. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I say thank you again. Mike, thanks again. And we stand adjourned, and I look forward to you joining us for our next Influencer series.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.